Winter. Time for ice fishing, snowmobiles, and maybe a little pond hockey. Winter's full of fun and games. Until a pipe freezes and bursts. Get ahead of the freezing weather with Mow and Flow. It monitors your home's water and shuts it off automatically before it can burst your winter plans. Moen.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury, Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, online, sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, the best in new inventory, great pre-owned inventory. With the Sunbury Motors guarantee, that means they go over every vehicle on the lot. Makes the buying experience so much easier, better. And a fabulous service department, whether it happens to be quick lane or inspections, routine, difficult to handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummel's Wharf, online, sunburymotors.com. With that, we bring in from the York Dispatch, the outstanding Frank Bodani. Sir, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Hey, Steve. Good afternoon to you. I hope things are going well in this new day for Penn State football, right?
New day for Penn State football as I sit in Ann Arbor getting ready for Penn State basketball. Yeah. So let's start with that. There are certain hires along the way that I think make a statement. You feel like this is one of them. What statement did it make to you?
Wow, Jim Knowles. I mean, I think it showed that Penn State, whether you want to say finally or once and for all or however you would describe it, is all in, fully invested in trying to win a national championship, meaning using every resource possible, because they just reset the bar on assistant coaches' salaries, reportedly making Jim Knowles the highest paid college football assistant ever. So they saw a window to try to get what they maybe think is the best defensive coordinator in the country, and they did everything to get it. And I don't know if Penn State fans really had that feeling in the past when it came to hiring like this.
I mean, James Franklin has felt this way for 11 years and has had to fight the good fight for a long time to convince others that this is the way you need to do it. How important is it at this time in this place that something like this has happened after all the days he fought to make things like this happen in many areas, not just this?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's critical because college football is changing so quickly, and you've seen many instances with entire conferences even getting left behind if you do not adjust and you do not look ahead, play ahead, and invest. And I guess, some people would also say maybe it's remarkable and a good thing that James Franklin has stuck it through at Penn State, because certainly he, like others, could always change and go elsewhere where maybe he thinks the support was more full. But he's here, and he seems like, at least it appears from the outside, that things are aligning where, yes, Penn State is able to do the same things that an Ohio State or an Alabama or Texas or Oregon is able to do. It's like the handcuffs might be off, so to speak. You don't have to find a workaround, right? And so I think that's exciting for people. I mean, and it comes at a time when, you have to invest if you want to stay up with those other programs. If you want to compete for a national title, I think Penn State's looking at well, what did Michigan do? How did Michigan do this? How did Ohio State do this? And now they're doing it.
Whenever an offensive coordinator is hired, and I was talking earlier with Nate about this, whenever an offensive coordinator is hired, my idealistic standard is, okay, can they find one more score each half? When a new defensive coordinator is brought in, my standard is always idealistically, can they find me one more stop each half? And if Penn State had found one more stop each half, they wouldn't have lost a game this season. How do you view that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, so much attention is on Penn State's offense, and everything's being picked through what they didn't do, how they couldn't do it. I mean, and partly, I mean, the defense has been so consistent and good. So maybe they get a little bit of a pass in some ways. But the defense, to me, has had chances this past year to really maybe help lift this up at the end of a game and didn't quite do it. And what stands out to me about Jim Knowles' defense at Ohio State is the consistency, but also the way that they seem to learn and regroup a bit in midseason after their loss to Oregon, but also the way they took care of business at the end of games. So in their two of their biggest games, the second half of the year, at Penn State, against Texas in the playoffs, Ohio State, their defense, in a way you could say, won them the games or preserved them the games with goal line stands.
Right.
And they got the job done when it mattered the absolute most. And I mean, and Jim Knowles has gotten his team to do it, and he's done it at more than just Ohio State the past couple of years. I mean, his track record is pretty impressive.
Great track record. That's why when you sit back and you say, okay, I have an opening, because Tom Allen left on his own. He went to Clemson. I have an opening. Who is the single best person I think I can find to fill that spot? And James Franklin identified it and then had the ability to do it. I think that's important in all this.
Oh, it's incredible because, yeah, do you have the resources to even go after the number one guy on your list, right? You may not in the past. But two, is that number one guy even realistic? And I think that you could argue that Jim Knowles may be the best defensive coordinator in the country, and Penn State thought they had an opportunity to go get him, and they took advantage, and they did, which is checking several boxes along the way that I don't know if I even would have thought that something like this would be possible 5 years ago. Well, not only was it possible, but they somehow made it happen. And now you're pairing, in a different way, they did that with Andy Kotelnicki, who maybe they saw as the best up-and-coming offensive coordinator that they could go get, and they made it happen. And now they are pairing him on the other side, maybe the best defensive mind in the game going. So what a combination.
I'm not going to comment on other situations. That's for other people to do. But how important is it, for example, Andy Kotelnicki has a we guy in Phil Troutwine, Ty Howell, Jaywan Sider, Danny O'Brien, Marcus Hagans. How important is it that Jim Knowles is walking into a situation where Deion Barnes is a we guy, Terry Smith's a we guy, Anthony Poindexter's a we guy, Dan Connor is a we guy. In other words, it's not about my guys, my position, but they're we people. How important is that for a guy like Jim Knowles to walk into a situation like that?
Well, that's critical, too, and I'm sure that's part of why he would entertain this job, right? Because he doesn't have to go in and try to recreate, move things around, worry about how he's going to deal with this position or that. I mean, it's all in place running smoothly. He's there to just take it and elevate. He's not there to have to recreate any of it. It's all there, and the players are there. So the talent is there for the most part in place, and the coaching staff that he's going to be working with. So the things he depends on the most, all those guys you mentioned, are already running their own shows the way they need to be done. He doesn't have to worry and deal with any of it. He can just do the thing, to me, I would think he can just do the thing he's best at. And that's taking a superb unit and elevating it just a little more.
Exactly. And the other part of this, too, leading up to Jim Knowles, all the players that are coming back, when we're talking about money, people think of money for the most part as, how was it used in the transfer portal? That's not the primary use of it if you have a terrific roster. It's roster retention, and Penn State's roster retention numbers were extremely strong. What does that tell everybody about that part of it?
Well, it shows you the foundation that Penn State James Franklin has built and his staff of talent. It shows you the buy-in, the culture, all of it, and it's really smart investment, right? So if you have a chance to invest your resources into known commodities that are already performing, that are part of your family, that you know who they are, you know how they're going to act on and off the field, you'd probably want to invest more in that than you would in somewhat unknown quantities.
Right.
And you see teams across the country having or thinking they have to invest in unknown commodities, and sometimes it goes well, usually for the short term. Often it's not sustainable. Penn State's they're investing their money, to me, more wisely than anyone. And so it's worked. And I go back to, it worked at Michigan when they brought back a lot of their roster 2 years ago. It worked at Ohio State when, that the transfers they brought in get the splashy headlines, but it's really the core they brought back. That was the foundation of them winning their national title. And Penn State's doing the exact same thing. Less unknowns, less worries, less concerns. You know what you're getting, right, from Nick Singleton and Katron Allen before the 2025 season. As we see, you don't really know. Those two receivers they're bringing in the transfer portal, I'm sure they're vetted and they're really promising, but they've never played for Penn State in the Big Ten. So, very smart move. I never would have thought that Penn State would be able to bring all these guys back there. So even better than I would think imagined.
At some point, Jim will talk with the media. When he does, what's the question you would like to hear an answer to from him?
Wow. Well, question he will actually answer in front of a room of reporters. Okay. I'd like to see what how he would answer. Well, he's going to be familiar to some degree with what Penn State has on defense. What does it need to do to get better, even morally, to win a national championship? Would he offer anything about the current makeup of his defense? From an outside and now from suddenly an inside point of view. That's because Penn State's defense checks most of the boxes right away, on paper. Really, what are they missing going into the season? Well, they got to find a middle linebacker and probably another defensive tackle starter, and I guess decide on who's going to start at safety. But there's not a lot. So what's his philosophy of trying to make this, taking a unit that's already really good and making it elite? That's what I would want to know.
Very interesting. Frank, as always, absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for your time today.
Sure.
It's obviously an important day for Penn State football. We appreciate you being a part of it.
Absolutely. All the best on the basketball road. Hope to see you again soon, Steve.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. We'll come back, wrap it up in a moment. Brought to you by Sunbury Motors on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
There's something to be said about a sale with a handshake, a service technician who really knows what he's doing. They can explain it in English what the problem is. There's nothing better than having that friend you could trust in the area. That's Sunbury Motors, where you get selection, knowledgeable salespeople, and prices that fit your budget, and more important, that friend you can trust. Welcome to Sunbury Motors, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. You could shop other dealers and compare prices, but at Sunbury Motors, you get their lowest price promise. They research the current used vehicle market and guarantee their used car prices are the lowest. If you find a lower price, Sunbury Motors will beat it. 3 dealers all in one. See their full new and pre-owned inventory at sunburymotors.com. Pick out a vehicle you like and schedule your test drive online. Follow them on Facebook. Sunbury Motors Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.